We are going to read from two passages this morning under the idea of leaving a legacy. Again, from Deuteronomy Chapter 6. These are words that in observant Jewish homes, these words are repeated even today, morning and evening. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. These commands that I give you today are to be upon your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you're at home or when you walk along the road, when you lie down, when you rise up. Tie them as symbols on your hands. Bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the doorposts of your homes and on your gates. Deuteronomy 6, 4-9. And then a New Testament passage, John 15. Jesus is speaking, and he says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch of mine that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, so that it will bear even more fruit. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Remain in me, as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. If you do not remain in me, you are like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you remain in me, and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. This is the word of the Lord. Amen. Amen. Well, included in your luminoso is an outline of my message. It's called A Fruitful Life. Yakov Smirnoff, a Russian comedian, has written a book. It's entitled Seeing America on 6 Rubles a Day. And the first time, he tells about his first time being in a supermarket and just being amazed at all the stuff that's in an American supermarket. He says, you can find powdered milk. All you do is add water and whew, you have milk. And powdered orange juice. Add water, you got orange juice. And then he saw baby powder. And he said, what a country! We're going to talk about kids a little bit today. So, if you've had more than one, you know how things change over time. Your first pregnancy, you religiously practice your breathing, Second time you're pregnant, you don't practice because you know it didn't help at all last time. And the third time, you get an epidural in the 8th month. And then after they're born, they have this pacifier. And kid drops the pacifier, falls on the ground, you pick it up, take it home, sterilize it before you put it near their mouth again. Second child, kid drops the pacifier, spray it off a little bit with his apple juice. Third time, drops his pacifier, you pick it up, wipe it on your shirt, and stick it back in his mouth, right? Things change over time, right? First child, everything is color coordinated, nice, neat, folded in the bureau, so you can. Second child, you just make sure there isn't anything too badly soiled and stained. Third child, boys can wear pink, right? Who cares? So how it changes. But in it all, obviously, there's a heavy responsibility when we're parents, right? And as John says in one of his letters, our greatest joy is to see our children walking in the truth, right? To see them know Christ, to see them walking in his ways. But probably our greatest fear is that they won't, that we're going to mess up. It's hard being a parent. So I want to talk to you about leaving a legacy. And again, I want to stress, it's not just for parents. We are all in the business of participating in covenant with God to influence the next generation, right, for him. And so you might be a grandparent, you might not be a parent at all, but you know parents, you have kids in your life that you are an influence to, an aunt, an uncle, whatever. We all have influence in the next generation. It might be a person who is involved with youth in some type of school program or other types of things. So what I'm trying to say in terms of leaving a legacy, I hope every one of us takes something away and can apply, right? Because, we're losing. We're losing a generation. And it's like in Judges, you remember when the next generation grew up and they didn't know what God had done, or somehow it wasn't passed down to them, and once they forgot God, the results were disastrous. So we're here to leave a legacy. I like to say to be D6 disciples. And that comes from Deuteronomy 6, which we read earlier, about how we are to pass along, to impress these things upon our children. D6 disciples. The first thing means that we are fully devoted to God ourselves. And next week I'm going to really focus on Deuteronomy 6, so we'll get more into the context and what's going on in that passage. But it talks about, first of all, it has to be you. You can't pass on what you don't have, right? What you aren't experiencing. If your life isn't compelling to your children to make them want to know the Jesus you serve, they probably won't, right? So our lives have to be so filled so that it just... Well, like often in the Old Testament, God said, when your sons or daughters ask you, why do we do this, or why this, but if our lives aren't showing that, they're not going to ask. They're not going to be open. So, fully devoted to God who saved us. That's the first thing. Hear, O Israel, Deuteronomy 6 says, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be upon your hearts. You got to tattoo them on your hearts. They got to be a part of you. Because the second main part of leaving a legacy is that we are actively passing the knowledge of God to the next generation. Okay, so we're fully devoted ourselves, and then we are involved in the business of actively passing it along to others. And those are the next verses. Talk about them when you sit at home, when you walk along the road, when you lie down, when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands. Bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the doorposts of your homes and on your gates. In other words, just make it a part of everything. Just make it a part of everything. And I like to think of kind of two categories. Faith talks, because he says when you sit at your home, when you lie down, talk about it. Those are opportunities to teach, to model, to show what the Word of God says. And God moments as you're walking along the road. For us, it would be as you're driving in your car, as you're dropping your kids off at school, or whatever happens. God moments, times to, hey, isn't God good? Did you see that? Well, and bring in the conversation. So we're going to talk more, a little bit about that at the end, and much more next time. But we're here to leave a legacy. It begins with us, and then it continues as we pass it along to others. And again, I'm not talking just about parents to kids. As we talk about faith talks and God moments, Jane was telling us this week that pretty much every night of the week, she talks to her mother by phone. Her mother lives about 800 miles away, and they read one of the chapters of Proverbs together, take turns reading, and maybe a New Testament reading or another Old Testament reading, and then they'll talk and pray a bit. They're 800 miles apart. But they're taking time to talk together, to pray together. And so what I'm saying is not just parents and kids. It might be you and somebody else, another adult, a friend, but we are all in the business of being fruitful in the lives of others. Making sense? Okay, so Jesus gives the image of a vine and branches. So this is kind of focused on the first part of that. What do we have? How are we fully devoted to God so that we have something to pass along? I love this imagery. In Isaiah, and there's, now John 15, let me just mention. John 15, we read it. It kind of seems like it's just plopped in there. It's a beautiful passage all by itself where Jesus says, I am the true vine, my Father's the gardener, and he goes on about branches and bearing fruit and so on and so on. But you got to remember, it's right after John 14. Makes sense, right? John 15 comes after 14. If you look in your Bibles and see what happens in 14, that's where it begins with, let not your hearts be troubled, believe in God, believe also in me. He's talking to them on the last night before his crucifixion, right? And the last verse of John 14, after having this long conversation with his disciples about what's going to happen and the coming of the Spirit and all that, he says, okay, let's leave now. So they're on their way to the Garden of Gethsemane, best I can figure. They're walking on the night he's going to be arrested, after he's encouraged them with his promises, and the Spirit's going to come after I'm gone, and they have all these questions, and that's where he gives this little conversation in John 15. And I just wonder if they're walking along out of the city, down the hill, up to the Mount of Olives, to the Garden of Gethsemane, maybe there were some vineyards there. It was common in Israel. Maybe he saw that, and always the teacher, he said, I am the true vine. My Father is the vine dresser, the gardener. Now, there's a rich history of this image in Old Testament and biblical Israel history. For example, we're going to read just one passage, Isaiah chapter 7. It's not on your outline, but it's just one of the many passages in the Old Testament where God says Israel, his people, are like a vineyard or like a vine, okay? He says, I will sing for the one I love, a song about his vineyard. My loved one had a vineyard on a fertile hillside. He dug it up and cleared off the stones, planted it with the choicest vines, built a watchtower in it, cut out a wine press as well. Then he looked for a crop of good grapes. You see what he's saying? He says, I chose you as my people. I cared for you. I invested in you. Just like a gardener invests in his vineyard, like a farmer with his vines. And I was looking for good results. But it yielded only bad fruit. You know a little of Israel's history, right? How they constantly were turning away from God. So instead of producing the good fruit he wanted, they went away from him. Now, you dwellers in Jerusalem and people of Judah, judge between me and my vineyard. What more could have been done for my vineyard than I have done for it? When I looked for good grapes, why did it yield only bad? Now I will tell you what I'm going to do to my vineyard. I will take away its hedge, and it will be destroyed. I will break down its wall. It will be trampled. I will make it a wasteland, neither pruned nor cultivated, and briars and thorns will grow there. I will command the clouds not to rain on it. The vineyard of the Lord Almighty is the nation of Israel, and the people of Judah are the vines he delighted in. He looked for justice, but saw bloodshed, for righteousness, but heard cries of distress. Woe to you who add house to house and join field to field till no space is left, and you live alone in the land. Why did I throw that in? Because there's a rich history of that image of God saving his people, Israel, to be that vine, that vineyard that bears fruit and that shows his presence, that demonstrates his grace, his glory to the nations, and they failed. So you got to think, as the disciples heard this, when Jesus says, I am the vine, say, wow. There's all this background, this biblical background, understanding, okay? In fact, even today, I got a picture of an Israeli coin. Even today, on much of the coinage of Israel, they show grapes. Interesting, huh? It says Yisrael on the top in Hebrew. So Israeli coinage, even today, reflects that biblical picture. So Jesus picks it up and he says, I am the true vine. You know, Israel failed. God's people failed. But I'm the true vine. Wow. Now that whole picture. As I was studying for the message, I came across something that was really intriguing. So I got some pictures for you. This is from the Hampton Court Vine in London, England. Now what's unique about this? They say it's 1,000 years old. That's pretty fascinating itself. But it is so huge. Show another picture. This is all from one root. Some of the vines are 200 feet long. So here you got this vine. There's another picture. It's at the Hampton Court castle in London, England. So you can kind of see above that white, that thing with all the vines. You know, all of that comes from this last picture. That's the vine. Everything else, the branches. That's the root. It's been there for years. It's huge. And I thought, man, that's a good picture. When you think, well, Jesus says, I am the true vine, and you are the branches. If you remain in me, you'll have life. If you don't, it's like a branch that's cut off. It can't live. So let's just look quickly at that image. It's pretty obvious. Jesus says, I'm the true vine, which means I'm the source of life. And he says that in many different passages, as we've already seen in our studies of the Gospels. You know, he says, I'm the water of life, I'm the bread of life, I am the life, resurrection and the life. He is the source of life. I am the true vine, my Father is the gardener. John 15 begins. John 1 says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life. Life. And that life was the light of all mankind. He's the vine. He's the source of life. He's the center. Now he says, my Father is the gardener. That's significant as well. Father's the gardener. What does that mean? A gardener is the one who owns it. At least in this case, both owner and caretaker. Right? My Father's the gardener. And you see that as he goes through his picture of this vine and vineyard and branches and who takes care of it and so on. The Father removes those who are not fruitful and prunes those who are, etc., etc. The Father is the gardener. I am the true vine, my Father is the gardener. Again, John 15:1. I love 1 Chronicles 29 as an image of that. Everything in the heavens and earth is yours, O Lord. And this is your kingdom. We adore you as being in control of everything. Riches and honor come from you alone. You are the ruler of all mankind. Your hand controls power and might. It is at your discretion that men are made great and given strength. Everything in the heavens and earth is his. This is his vineyard, folks. And he's put his Son, Jesus Christ, in the middle as the source of life. And he's saying, listen, folks, you got to connect to him. You got to draw life from him. There's no life apart from him. Without him, you can do nothing that's going to be of lasting value, of worth, right? So I'm the vine, Jesus says, source of life. My Father is the gardener. He's going to prune. He's going to cut away. He's going to do whatever it takes to have fruit. And we are what? The branches. You are the branch. What's the goal? Producing fruit, right? What do you have? A vine and a vineyard. Not so you can look at it and say, oh, look at the beautiful plants. It's for fruit. Yes? It's for fruit, producing fruit. That's the whole goal of it all. So he says, I'm the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me, that's a key word there. Older version said, abide in me, stay with me, remain connected to me. You remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. For apart from me you can do nothing. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. This is one of the 3 passages in the Gospel of John where Jesus says very clearly, here's what it is to be a disciple. It's a person who bears fruit, right? It's a person who bears fruit. Now you can say, well, what's that? What's fruit? It's influence, right? We have an influence in somebody else's life. We make a difference in their lives. That's fruitfulness, right? Fruits of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, that's fruit. God's Spirit working in us. When our children take hold of our faith, that's fruit, guys. That's the best in the world. When somebody else says, I don't know what it is about you, but I'd like to know more about what you believe. That's fruit, right? I have one of my ultimate Frisbee buddies. I had lunch with some months back, and he's a character, man. He's out there, crazy. And this Tuesday, He talked with me and he said, have you ever seen the movie God's Not Dead? Which just floored me that he asked that question. And interestingly, we just watched it last Sunday evening. I said, well, yeah, as a matter of fact, I just watched it. Well, he said, I've been reading different people in philosophy who criticize it, and I'd kind of like to watch it and talk to you about it. Well, yeah, maybe we ought to do that. I'm kind of almost jumping out of my shoes, Sure. I said, wow, God's working. Love that. When you see an influence in the life of another person, you say, man, I don't know it's not about me, it's about what he's done, God is doing. But that's fruit. When our kids take hold of our faith, that's fruit. So, and we'll talk more in coming weeks. And by the way, Wednesday night, Leaving a Legacy, we're going to focus on that just really hard. And I invite all of you, I'll give you a little promo when we close the worship. But for today, I want to challenge us to do what it takes to bear fruit. To do what it takes. What does it mean to remain in him? To be closely connected like a vine is connected to branches. Okay? Do what it takes to bear fruit. I'll list two main areas. Number one, we need to stay closely connected to Jesus. Closely connected to Jesus. Now that ought to be obvious. He's the vine, we're the branches, we're cut off, no fruit. Cut it away and it has no life source. It will die quickly, right? I trimmed my mesquite tree yesterday, cut off some branches that were hanging kind of low, trying to keep the tree growing up. Once you cut that branch off, it isn't going to be long before it turns, withers, and dies, right? Pretty obvious. Jesus is a pretty good teacher. It's so clear. You got to stay closely connected. Remain in me, he says, and I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. How do we do that? I think there's two main areas, and this isn't going to surprise you or shock you. But one of them is that we are connected through his word. How do you get to know somebody? You listen to him, right? You have communication with him, right? How does he communicate with us? His Spirit uses his word for us to know and to learn, right? So we would know him better. So the more we have of his word within us, he says these commands have to be on your hearts, and then impress them on your kids. It's got to be in your hearts. I'll give you some ideas when we close out. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. John 15:7. 2 Timothy 3 says, all scripture is God-breathed, is useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, training in righteousness, so that the servant of God may be thoroughly equipped. That's what I want to be, thoroughly equipped, ready for whatever God sends me, right? I mean, there's often I hear people say, oh, I wish I knew more. Or I had this conversation with this Jehovah's Witness, and man, they know their word so bad. Well, yeah. They put a lot of work into it. They're very disciplined. And why are they so disciplined and we aren't? Right? So don't wait till the question comes or the battle rages. You got to be connected to him through his word now, right? Champions are made in the off season. You don't wait to get ready for the game an hour before. You're training all season long. You don't get to be a great musician or an accomplished artist unless you put work into it, unless it's time, it's discipline, it's in the Word. We have the Word of God, folks. And this isn't a religious exercise so I can say, oh, I read my 10 verses today, check. This is, I want to know the living God. And he's given me these words to help. Wow. And we connect through communication with him. His word, he communicates to us. We connect with communication with him. Jesus said in John 16, until now you have not asked for anything in my name. Ask and you will receive, and your joy will be complete. He gives us the privilege. Again, not to check off, okay, I had my prayer time, But time alone where I can just listen. Do you have any quiet moments in your day where you just turn everything off and you're quiet before God and say, Lord, I'm in your presence. Speak to me. Just listen and share your heart with him and pray for those who are dear to you. It may be a minute here, it may be a minute here, it may be a half hour there, it might be, but those moments are what shape us, right? It's what keeps us connected to the vine. Without those, how do we have that? And I've suggested some things on your outline. The Psalms, read the Psalms. Many of them are prayers. Don't know what to pray? Find a couple of Psalms that are really meaningful to you and just repeat them to God as your prayer. Right? Or Ephesians 1, I read it earlier, where Paul says, I pray that the eyes of your heart will be enlightened so that you will know him better. And that you will understand the hope to which he has called you and the power that is at work in you. Man, you want to know what to pray for your friends or your kids? Pray that. Ephesians 1, 17 to 20. Or Ephesians 3, where Paul writes about us being strengthened in our hearts as Christ lives in us, so that we might know how great his love is, how high, how deep. Pray that for your kids. Ephesians 3, 14 to 20. If you're not sure what to pray, just open up the Bible and start praying some of these prayers. Colossians 1, say, I pray that they will live a life worthy of God, that they will have knowledge of him, and so on and so on. So stay closely connected. You want to grow fruit? What do you need? Connection to the vine, right? And the more vital and the more wholesome and the more healthy that connection is, the more likely your life is going to have influence. And you got something to pass along. You got something to talk about. I just notice when I'm faithful in the morning, God opens up conversations during the day. And I say, you know what I read this morning, blah, blah, blah. And when I don't have that, I'm just blowing smoke, just talking out of whatever. But when you've got that, God is speaking and the relationship is growing. And I think also we need to stay closely connected to other disciples. We need each other. I read an article this week about how, in our social media age, we've got all these connections, all these friends out there through various media, various networking sites, whatever. But most people don't have somebody that they can call at 2 a.m. when they're in trouble and know that they'll be there for you. We don't have that person. We need not only those other types of things, we need the face-to-face, perhaps more than ever, because we got all this other stuff going on. We get so busy. We need the face-to-face. The writer of Hebrews says, let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another. All the more, we need to spur each other on. We need to encourage each other. Let me just say, Wednesday evenings, we're going to do Leaving a Legacy. It's a focus on the family thing and some other elements that I think are going to be really helpful for all of us, marriage-wise, parenting-wise, just understanding family kind of things. But we need other people. And I can remember early on when we were just married, it was Ken and Mary Lou. And we looked at their marriage and we said, we want a marriage like that. And we watched them. And we spent time with them. And then a little bit later in our lives when we had kids, there was Paul and Judy Dirksey. And we said, you know what? We want a family like they have. And so I just invite you, wherever you are in life, to look and say, God, who have you put in my life that I can learn from? Look at somebody else's marriage and say, you know what, I'd like our marriage to be like that. And then get with them. Hey, say, can we have coffee together? Say, oh, that's kind of crazy. No, it's not. They would be honored. Would be honored to say, if you said to them, you know what, we see things in your marriage. How do you make that happen? How do you do that? How do you make a marriage last over time? We make it a point wherever we go. We're in Sam's, and they're trying to sell us DirecTV. And I won't tell you what my wife says. But it's about...
I say, we'd rather make love than watch TV.
Okay, if she wants to tell you, she told you. And these, these 22-year-old salesmen or ladies look at her like, did she just say that? And I'm just kind of... But we alwathat try to just say, hey, 43 years and it gets better and better. And they look at us and say, that's so encouraging. Because that's not the message they're getting out there in the world. And there's a lot of brokenness. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of husbands who aren't faithful to their vows and are destroying their wives. There's a lot of kids who are just going off in directions because they haven't had guidance. It's awful. And I don't mean to be a downer, but they need to see that, hey, marriage can work. Parents can love their kids and kids can love their parents. It still works. And God's way is good and it's best. And so we need each other. We need to encourage each other. We need to be with each other. So, let me close. Let's give you some examples of faith talks. I encourage you to memorize Deuteronomy 6. What is it? 6 to 9? 4 to 9. Deuteronomy 6, 4 to 9. And they say, well, I can't memorize. I know, that's what people always tell me. But then you start thinking about all the facts you got in your head. How'd they get there? You memorized them. Numbers, passcodes, all kinds of things you memorize. So we're going to practice a little bit. Got a couple minutes? All right. So it goes like this. Hear, O Israel. Hear, O Israel. The Lord our God. The Lord our God. The Lord is one. The Lord is one. Now repeat after me. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You just memorized the verse. It's not that hard. Now that's a short one, I understand. Here's the second verse. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. Could you say that? There you go. You got 2 verses down already. It's not that hard. But it requires discipline. It requires repetition. Just repeating the phrase until you get 1 verse down and then add a second verse. And I encourage you to do that because if we're going to be D6, Deuteronomy 6 disciples, and if we're going to have D6 families, well, it begins there. Let me give you some other ideas. I mentioned last week Proverbs, and I mentioned how Jane and her mother are reading Proverbs a chapter a day. Proverbs, today's what date is it? 17. So you read Proverbs 17 today, which I did this morning, and then maybe pick out a verse that you want to share with your wife or your kids. And here's one. He who covers over an offense promotes love, but whoever repeats the matter separates close friends. Whoa. Cover over an offense promotes love. Repeats the matter separates close friends. That's pretty practical, isn't it? So today, let's just watch when we're tempted to say something about another person who maybe offended us or disappointed us or whatever. Let's just cover it up and not say anything more. Oh, that's a specific challenge for the day, isn't it? Or I really like this one. I had a difficult time. Oh, here's a good one. Proverbs 17. If a man pays back evil for good, evil will never leave his house. Whoa. How often we're tempted to get back at people, and the word says, you do that, it's just going to continue. Or I love this one. Even a fool is thought wise if he keeps silent. Now think about that. You want to look smart? Keep your mouth shut. Somebody might think you're foolish, and then you open your mouth and you remove all doubt. Right? So, I just think the word is so practical, it's so good. You just just a very specific way of getting into the word is to read a chapter of Proverbs a day, focus on maybe one verse that really speaks to you, and then seek to apply it during the day. Today devotionals are Today magazine, or just a little devotional. We have them on the tables out there. They're devotionals printed by our denomination, come out every couple months. The blessing is something we do in our home. We speak the blessing every day. I do to my wife when we go to sleep at night. Faith at home readings are the readings I have inside your outline. It can be used individually for your own private time to think and consider the word and spend time with God, or as a family. On Wednesday nights, we're going to give more ideas along those lines. But let me just say this in conclusion. Folks, we are not living in a sitcom. What do I mean? Life is no joke. We are living in, can I use the word war? And I don't want to be like a Chicken Little who's saying, oh, the sky's falling. But a whole lot of families are hurting, a lot of marriages are broken, a lot of people, a lot of kids. We had another one in our school family this week. The guy's found another woman. And you can talk with him and say, do you really know what's going to happen with all this? What are the implications of this? You're leaving your wife, you're leaving your two beautiful little kids. And from this day forward, they're going to be torn between this parent and that parent. Yeah. And it's happening all over, and should we be surprised? Should we be surprised? The Bible didn't say everything's going to be great. If you're a Christian, no problems. No, the Bible said there's a war going on. You know why? Because you and I are dangerous. We're dangerous against the enemy. And that's why he's trying to take us out. If he can take us out at our marriage, or he can take us out at our family level, if he can cause brokenness there, he's going to take away our influence and our fruit bearing, right? And so he knows, the forces of darkness know, that we are dangerous if we are all out, sold out to God. Living in love for him, doing battle for our kids. And so he's pulling out all the stops, I believe, in these latter times to attack marriage, the family. And so more than ever, we need to be people who are connected to Christ and who are fruitful in the lives of others. So let me close with this. How's your connection to the vine? How's your connection? How could it be improved? What are you going to be doing this week to deepen it? And how's your fruit developing?